Right, a very good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Good afternoon. Dr. Koh Poh Koon, Senior Minister of State, MSE and MOM. Mr. Heng Chi Hao, Deputy Secretary General, NTUC. Mr. John Ng, Vice President, SNEF, SNEF. Tripartite partners, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Now, welcome to the Tripartite Collective Dialogue. Tripartism in Action, 30 years of developing sustainable retirement and re-employment practice policies. My name is James and I'm your MC today. Now, before we begin with the program, one thing very important, fire emergency procedures, right? Okay. Now, in the event of an emergency, 2 alarms will ring, followed by an announcement to evacuate. Please remain calm and walk in an orderly manner to the nearest exit points over there, right? Now, if the fire is outside there, not to worry, there's also exit points here, okay? Right, so just walk orderly, and you will have fire wardens to guide you to the assembly area, which is at Reed Bridge, right? So once at the assembly area, just wait for further instructions for the next course of action. Well, that's enough about fire. Let's talk about a different fire, tripartism fire, right? Okay, the fire in tripartism. So tripartism has been an enduring competitive advantage for Singapore as we transformed and grew our economy over the years. Now, through collaboration, rather than confrontation on many employment issues, the tripartite partners have achieved a win-win-win outcome for workers, employers, and the nation. Now today we look at the concerted efforts by the tripartite partners to tackle the challenges of an aging workforce, help employers and workers to be ready, re-employable, and adaptable in order to continue working and improve their retirement adequacy. Now we are happy to have partnered with Dr. Chia Choon, Associate Professor, National University of Singapore, to commission a case study which features the history of the development of Singapore's retirement and re-employment policies. And it explores how close tripartite collaboration is instrumental in the behind-the-scenes negotiations to address the challenges of an aging workforce. In today's program, Dr. Chia will share this case study and engage in a dialogue with our distinguished panel of speakers on how the tripartite partners have come together over the past 30 years and effectively tackled this difficult challenge. We'll also like for you to be part of the panel discussion. Now, as the program progresses, you can send in your questions by scanning into the QR code over there, right? There's a QR code, right? We'll then address your questions during the panel discussion. Now, alternatively, if you prefer to speak, just raise your hand and our ushers will bring the microphone over to you. Now, in the same QR code, you can also continue to participate in the activity to reflect on how we can create opportunities to support senior workers and what is important in the future of tripartism to ensure Singapore's continued success. Now, your responses will be incorporated into a word cloud that can be viewed outside there in the foyer during the tea break, right? So that'll be something very interesting. So we'll want you to really take part and scan the QR code, right? So now, before we formally start, we'd also like to thank all our tripartite partners and Temasek Foundation, and also each and every one of you for setting aside time to attend today's dialogue. Now, we hope you'll gain many valuable insights and help to shape the tripartite movement together as a family, right? So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to invite Senior Minister of State, MSE and MOM, Dr. Koh Poh Koon, to deliver the welcome remarks. Dr. Koh, please.
Brother Heng Chi Hao, Deputy Secretary General, NTUC, Brother Jong Ng, Vice President, SNEF, Brother Bob Tan, Deputy Chairman of Tripartite Alliance Limited, of course, Tripartite partners, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, very good afternoon. Now, it's a great pleasure for me to join you this afternoon to talk about this Tripartite Collective event with a topic about where we have been in the last 30 years on this very important topic of helping our senior workers. Now, we will take a little journey down memory lane to look at the milestones of our retirement and re-employment policy journey, which has fundamentally shaped the senior employment landscape here in Singapore. Now, while I may be taking you down this memory lane, unfortunately, I wasn't around for the last 30 years walking this journey. I'm sure there are many more people with gray hair amongst us here who would have had more personal accounts to share about how this journey began some 30 years ago. But I think it's a journey worth recounting as we now try to chart our way forward about what to do in the aging population. Now, by now, everyone here in this room should know that Singapore is aging rapidly. We have one of the fastest aging populations in the world. And for a country that relies primarily on human capital as its most important resource, the human resource that we have as our most important asset, it's a fundamental challenge for us when we have an aging population, and it has wide implications in terms of how we can continue to achieve good economic growth, how we can ensure that our workers continue to have good jobs and good incomes, and of course, how we can also take care of each other as the population in general becomes older. Many of us here will have aged parents to look after, and I think in time to come, as more and more people are aged, the burden on the young will increase as well. But this problem of aging workforce is not a new problem. It's not something that just happened yesterday. It's not a recent development. In fact, we have been working on this issue for many decades now. As you look at the title, is for the last 30 years. So some of you may not be aware that the minimum retirement age of 60 was actually legislated only 30 years ago, in 1993. So that was probably when the journey that got us here today seriously started, 1993. And before that, most of the workers here in Singapore typically adhered to the colonial practice of retiring at 55 years old. Today, 55 is like the new 40, right? But 30 years ago, 55 seems like you're old enough to retire, partly because the life expectancy then was much shorter. Now, today, the retirement age has been raised to 63 years old, and we also require employers to re-employ their workers up to 68 years old. Through much discussions, tripartite partners agreed that this will be raised to 65 and 70 years old respectively by 2030. So we are progressively raising the retirement and re-employment ages. How did our retirement policies evolve over the last 3 decades? And what did it take for us to get to where we are today and going forward to 2030? I'm glad that Prof. Chia has helped us put together a detailed case study that records the key milestones of Singapore's retirement and re-employment strategy. And I wish to highlight a few key points from our tripartite journey so that this forms some of the backdrop for us to go into our discussions later. Now, first, on the why. Why do we do this? In the 1980s, we were recovering from a recession amidst a tight labor market. So the tripartite partners started thinking about how to better tap on the aging silver workforce. Today, the need to do so is even more pressing and acute. And tripartite partners who have been working on this understood this very well. Now, while seniors comprise 1 in 6 Singaporeans, 1 in 6 in the year 2020, this will increase to 1 in 4 by the end of this decade in the year 2030. 1 in 4 means a quarter of the people will be above the age of 65. Now, if you think about it, 1/4 above the age of 65, 1/4 maybe are still schooling. That leaves only half of us. If half of us need to look after those schooling and those aged, that leaves only the last 1/4 to contribute to the workforce. That is a big challenge, and these are just very gross, rough division of what we have here in Singapore. Now, our seniors are living longer, and many, fortunately, remain in good health. And if we are successful in our Healthier SG initiative, more will continue to live longer and be in better health. So when they are living longer and they are in better health, they can contribute to their experience, their skills, their networks, to the economy and to society. And I think many people who are in good health and are able-bodied would want to at least continue their social engagements while at work, get themselves some income, but at the same time maintain their social circles. I often see many patients of mine, when I was still in practice, when the moment they stop social engagement, they stop working, they tell me personally they decline very fast. So it's not just for the sake of getting an income, but there are a lot of other tangible benefits to the individual in maintaining the mental, social engagement and the physical activity as well. So we must continue to support them, older workers, with opportunities to do so, rather than solely relying on foreign manpower to bolster our local labor force to sustain our economic growth. Now, the second thing, after talking about the why, is the how. The journey has not been an easy one, and it required compromises among tripartite partners. But this was possible because we share a common long-term vision. We wanted to create an environment where employers are able to productively tap on this silver workforce, and seniors are able to continue working if they wish to, and so that they can meaningfully be engaged while earning reasonable incomes and improving their retirement adequacy. Back in the 80s and 90s, when we first considered how to extend the productive longevity of our senior workers, we actually studied the Japanese model quite carefully. Some, I think, more senior than me may have been to Japan during those years to study that. Because the Japanese were also facing the challenges of an aging population. At that time, already far more aged than our society, and even today, even more stuck than us. Now, we also consulted widely with employers and the union leaders, and finally took bold actions to introduce the Retirement Age Act in 1993, legislating that retirement age cannot be lower than 60. So that was the very first landmark policy that allowed us to push the retirement age beyond the traditional 55. This effort required a lot of extensive work and collaboration by our unions to prepare the workers psychologically to accept the idea of working beyond age 55. It is not an easy task because you see today in many other Western countries, when they talk about raising retirement age, you see protests on the streets. So in those days, to break the traditional, what has been established as a norm of 55, requires a lot of groundwork engagement by our unions to convince the workers it is in their interest to do so. Now, employers also had to accept higher manpower costs, given that in those days, seniority-based wages were quite prevalent in the industry, with older workers earning as much as 3 times of what a young entry into the industry would earn for the same job. Now, further attempts to raise the minimum retirement age became even more difficult, as you can imagine, as employers were increasingly concerned about the wage costs that they have to bear. So this is something that is quite intuitive, quite natural that you can imagine. And we managed to raise it eventually to 62 in 1999. Employers understood the need to extend the minimum retirement age for workers, but unions also had to accept that we must allow employers to reduce wages for senior workers aged 60 and above to help to manage this cost so that it's something that can strike a balance between what the employers are prepared to bear and workers continue to get job opportunities. Once again, the spirit of tripartism has prevailed, where we manage to balance the needs of both employers and workers so that we do what is right and necessary for everyone's long-term interests. The MC just now said all the things about fire is not so good, but actually there's one thing where fire is good, and that's tripartism. When you have fire in tripartism, this is what we can do. Do things that might be difficult elsewhere, but we can do it here in Singapore. So in the mid-2000s, so now we're going into the next decade now, in the mid-2000s, tripartite partners again made several trips to Japan to learn how they applied the idea of re-employment to address the cost concerns related to hiring senior workers. So you can see us progressing by the decades now, tackling the issues even further. And around 2007, thereabout, in the middle of the year, mid-2000s, in 2007, we announced the plans to introduce re-employment in Singapore. So having raised the retirement age, we now look at re-employment. We spent 5 years explaining the concept to employers and to workers, and negotiating the implementation details before the legislation came into effect in 2012 to set a minimum re-employment age of 65. So this was after 5 long years of engagement, helping everyone to understand. This means that employers would now be obliged to re-employ workers beyond the retirement age up to the re-employment age. In return for the employers' support, unions accepted that employers should have the flexibility to adjust contracts and the job scopes for re-employed workers, including reasonable wage reductions. So this is really striking a balance between the concerns on both sides. It enabled senior workers to continue working longer while allowing employers to manage their business costs. Now, we had to consult and think through all the implementation details carefully, because the success of this policy depends critically on how well the employers and the unions understood and executed their roles and responsibilities. So if either party does not understand why it needs to be done in this way, we will have problems. Just imagine if the unions do not understand why some of the wages need to be adjusted, some of the roles and the scope needs to be changed, nor the employers understood why they need to continue to re-employ older workers, we will not be able to move forward. Because the challenge is that job scopes and business models are so diverse. There is really no one-size-fits-all strategy or methods to meet the needs of both sides. So both sides have to be able to do some give and take and understand the trade-offs that is needed. And in this way, across the whole economy, we can move forward together. For example, employers should discuss re-employment plans with their employees at least 6 months before they reach the retirement age, to ensure there's proper manpower planning and to help everyone arrive at a mutually agreeable and acceptable position. At the same time, unions play a key role in socializing and educating their workers to the need to be flexible and open-minded in discussing the re-employment terms. Otherwise, there will be stalemate, and the natural outcome will be to part ways. These details were laid out in the Tripartite Guidelines on the re-employment of older workers, which continues to be a key reference document today. And through strong tripartite support, we have kept disputes in this area quite low and the workplace trust and harmony at a very high level. Then in 2017, we further raised the re-employment age from 65 to 67. And quite an important thing, we removed the provision for employers. We removed the provision for employers to reduce wages when workers turn 60. So this is quite different from what was agreed on before. So you may ask, have employers' cost concerns disappeared in 2017? Did that change overnight? They were so concerned about it, but why did that change in 2017? And the answer, of course, is obviously no, they are still concerned about that. But cost concerns, I would say, have always been there. I think all employers have that concern. But this move was possible in 2017 because 2 decades before this, the tripartite partners had worked hard to reduce the extent of seniority-based wage systems. Now, the majority of firms had reduced the minimum to maximum ratio of salary bands from 3 times, I said earlier, down to about 1.5 times. So the unions implemented this also in all their collective agreements because they understood the longer-term goal is to help the workers stay employed and meaningfully engaged for as long as possible, as long as they are able to and they want to. So as you can see throughout the years, this spirit of tripartite understanding and compromise has allowed our retirement and re-employment policies to remain practical and sustainable. And mind you, this is quite an important structural change in the way the wages are being paid out. Right? So this whole background of foundational work that has been done, the trust that has been built, has allowed these things to change over a couple of decades. And in doing so, it has allowed us to extend the productive longevity of seniors to benefit both employers and importantly, the workers themselves. Now, more recently, the Tripartite Work Group on Older Workers made recommendations in 2019 to raise the retirement and re-employment ages further to 65 and 70 respectively by 2030. So we are a few years away from reaching that, and I think we are making good progress. Now, to support employers' extended obligations, the government introduced a senior employment credit, which provides wage offsets to employers who hire senior workers. We also rolled out the part-time re-employment grant to encourage employers to offer part-time re-employment options to our senior workers. Because not all senior workers want to work at a full-time basis. Some might want to take it a bit easier. Some might want to spend a bit more time with their grandchildren. Some might just want to get away from their spouse for a little while and just mix with other people a little bit more, whatever the reasons, right? So I think some of these part-time re-employment credits helps the senior worker to strike what's best for them, while at the same time contributing meaningfully to their company's needs. So in this year's COS, MOM also announced measures to uplift workers and boost their retirement adequacy, such as increasing CPF contribution rates for senior workers, as well as enhancing the Workfare Income Supplement Scheme, which has benefited about 1 million lower-wage Singapore workers since 2007. We will also be introducing the Majula Package Earn and Save bonus, which will provide annual CPF bonuses to eligible Singaporean seniors who continue to work. So government is putting in resources to also encourage both companies and workers to continue. Now, looking back, I would say the tripartite journey has been challenging, but a worthwhile one, because it has borne good fruits. Let me just share a few numbers. Our employment rate for seniors aged 55 to 64 has actually risen from 38.8% some 30 years ago in 1993, so 38.8% in 1993, to 70% in 2025, so almost doubling. The employment rate for seniors aged 65 and above, those much older, has more than doubled from 12.2% in 1993 to 30.6% in 2023. And in fact, today, 98% of retired workers who are eligible for re-employment are re-employed. So I think the numbers speak for themselves, that the efforts of the tripartite movement in engaging both employers and workers, with the governments supporting with schemes, has helped the numbers to actually creep up quite significantly over the last 3 decades. This brings me to my third point, which is that raising retirement and re-employment ages is only one part of the solution. Workers themselves must also take charge of their career health, plan ahead of time, and refresh their skills to adapt to the changing and evolving workplace demands. Now, we have introduced resources and programs to empower workers to do so. You would have probably read about it in the media, such as the Careers Finder feature on My Careers Future portal and career guidance under WSG's Polaris program. So we help workers to really navigate the employment landscape to find jobs that may suit them, as well as reskilling and upskilling programs such as the Career Conversion Program and the Skills Future Level Up Program. But employers must also be forward-looking. It's not just the workers who must have a different mindset change. Employers must also take active steps to implement progressive HR practices to support and extend the productive longevity of their senior workers and see that their workers are a resource they can further grow and utilize. Many workers and employers, in fact, have done so, and we recognize and thank them for their efforts. Now, let me cite a few examples. HDB, a government agency, set up a company training committee, a CTC, in 2019 to formulate and implement training initiatives aimed at helping older HDB officers stay ready, relevant, and resilient. These included programs to level up the officers' growth mindset and their digital literacy and open up more upskilling and reskilling opportunities. One such officer is Senior Estate Manager Lim Ting Hui, who joined HDB in 1979 as a housing and maintenance inspector. But by the time he reached retirement age in 2020, he had actually risen through the ranks to be a senior estate manager. Upon re-employment, he took on an advisory role to develop on-the-job training programs for HDB's estate executives. When HDB reorganized its branches in 2022, Ting Hui continued to undergo training to reskill himself and took on a new role in the car park's operations team. So this is an example of a worker who's prepared to be flexible, to move into a new role, to accept training and new skills, and to move with the needs of the organization. But it's also an example of an organization that is prepared to redesign some of the work and look for a role for a senior worker to play and contribute in areas of his strength. Another example is that of Goodrich Aerostructure Services Center, Asia Private Limited. This is a leading aerospace supplier providing maintenance, repair, and overhaul services of systems and components to major commercial airframers, engine manufacturers, and over 100 airlines around the world. Now, Goodrich built a strong partnership with one of our unions, CISU, the Singapore Industrial and Services Employees Union, to support older workers in lifelong learning, retirement planning, re-employment, employees upskilling and reskilling, and guides their workers through digital transformation. The workers demonstrated enthusiasm and adaptability in embracing new technology and digitalization. Workers like Mr. Chua Chi Ping, Mr. Kwang Bi Huat, Mr. Sadali bin Sohani, and Mr. Raymond Tan are commendable examples of such employees in this company who have been, in fact, with this company for more than 20 years, underwent the company's upskilling and reskilling programs, and are now embracing technology and digital tools to complete their tasks with greater ease and higher precision. So this shows that age is not a barrier to adopting new skills. So long as the mindset is prepared, the employees are willing, and the companies are also willing, I think when two hands can clap, this is where you achieve a good outcome for both. Brothers and sisters, our operating environment, demographics and policies will change. But there's one thing that remains constant, and that is our spirit of tripartism. In fact, it has changed for the stronger. And I think it's time for us to use this to our advantage. Tripartism is the unique approach where the government, unions, and employers collaborate and arrive at win-win outcomes for all three parties. Now, it sounds quite easy on paper. In Singapore, we brandish the word tripartism around a lot. And we probably have taken it for granted that this is how tripartism works. But the fact is that very few countries have managed to do so consistently. I recall an incident at this year's International Labour Organization conference in Geneva. Now, usually at the ILO conference, representatives from government, from the union, and from the employers will get a chance to speak to all the delegations across all the countries in the ILO. I remember this one Asian country where the employer representative went onto the podium. His entire speech was about scolding the government and saying the union is not helpful in helping them to weather the challenges. After he spoke, his union representative from that same country went up there, and the union representative started scolding the employers and the government for not supporting workers and leaving workers behind. And they all spoke not like me here in a very calm manner. It was almost like an election rally, fist pumping and all. And this is where it's a sharp contrast to when it's our turn to go to the podium and speak. You see our representatives speak on behalf of their constituents in a calm manner, advocating the views of the respective constituents, but also speaking on behalf of the other tripartite partners to show the fact that if we work together, we can achieve a lot more. So I think tripartism is not something that we should take for granted. It is, in fact, a strength that we have. Now, as mentioned at the start of my speech, our re-employment policies have evolved over the years. And at every point, the tripartite partners were added together, from policy design, from program development, and eventually to stakeholder engagement. This cycle will repeat again and again. Each time we face a challenge, each time we want to do something new, we repeat this process again and again. So much so that I think everyone has started to take this for granted as the norm. But this is not the norm in many places. Now, raising the re-employment age required both employers and employees to shift from their status quo positions. The change can be unsettling to some, but the tripartite partners continue to engage the ground, addressing all the new concerns while assuring them of a better collective outcome. Now, we are now facing new workforce and economic trends that will lead to new challenges. We continue to be an aging society, but the good news is that the profile of our senior workers is also changing. For example, In 2020, 3 in 10, that means 30% of the workers aged 55 to 64 had tertiary education, only 30%. By 2030, this will increase to more than 50% of workers. So the profile for older workers of the future and of today is drastically different from yesteryears. More seniors will therefore be in PMET jobs and have better retirement adequacy. Their CPF savings are better. Their aspirations will also evolve. So at the same time, throughout this change, the economic environment will also become more uncertain, and employers have to contend with geopolitical tensions, global competition for talent, and much shorter product and business cycles. So there are plus and minuses, but our approach to support senior employment will need to similarly evolve, to cater to the needs and aspirations of our future seniors and to support our employers in harnessing the potential in a more educated silver workforce. Now, in fact, we may already be at the forefront of this global challenge. Many countries are trying to find ways to tackle these challenges, including Japan, from whom we adapted our re-employment policy, but they have found varying degrees of success. Instead of adopting other countries' playbook, perhaps now, based on our strong history of tripartite collaboration, perhaps now it is an opportunity for tripartite partners in Singapore to develop our own innovative solutions to better harness the silver workforce. The key competitive advantage that we have, as I said again and again, is our strong spirit of tripartism, something that people say but cannot do, but something which we have exercised together for more than a few decades. By understanding the priorities of different stakeholders and building strong consensus among workers, employers, and the government, I'm confident we can continue to drive strong economic growth and create good jobs for all the years ahead. Our decades of working closely to tackle this issue with tripartism as a secret ingredient, a secret sauce, give me confidence that we will overcome these challenges so long as we continue to stick together and have a common vision, striking that balance. Now, before I end, I'd like to thank our tripartite partners, NTUC and SNAF, and the Tripartite Collective for putting together this very important event, our sponsor, Temasek Foundation, and of course, Dr. Chia, for the work on the case study, and everyone here for taking time to join us this afternoon. I hope you'll find the insights and the sharing later on useful, so that together we can make tripartism stronger and chart our way forward to enhance retirement and re-employment as well as retirement adequacy for all our senior workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Koh. Right, and now for the first segment of this afternoon's program, Dr. Chia, Associate Professor from National University of Singapore, will share the salient findings of the case study, Strategic Policies in an Aging Workforce, which explores how tripartism supported the development of the retirement and re-employment policies over the past 30 years, and how tripartite partners each did their parts to enable employers and workers to be ready, re-employable, and adaptable. Now, this study is complemented with interviews with key individuals who were directly involved in the various tripartite committees and gleans insights on the delicate and complex process of negotiations, allowing us to understand its challenges and ultimately what it takes to reach a win-win-win outcome. So it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Chia to deliver her presentation. Dr. Chia, please.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. SMS, Dr. Koh Poo Koon, NTUC DSG, Heng Chi Hao, and SNAF, Vice President, Mr. Jong representatives from the Tripartite, Ministry of Manpower, NTUC, and SNAF. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good afternoon. I First, I would really like to thank Dr. Koh for giving us such a wonderful overview of the journey that Singapore has embarked over the last 30 years. I also like to thank the Tripartite Collective for inviting me here to participate in this dialogue. This afternoon actually holds a special significance as we gather to commemorate and to reflect the key milestones in Singapore's retirement and re-employment policy in the past 30 years. In my presentation, I will journey with you to understand tripartism in action, and we are able to do this because many of you have kindly come forward to be interviewed, and we plow through a lot of the government documents to prepare this case study. Well, as Dr. Koh said, we are all very familiar that Singapore is aging. According to the United Nations population, the way to classify a country as being aging or young is based on a multiple of 7. Yeah, when it's 7%, we become aging. When it's 14%, we become age, and by 14%, we become super age. Now, as you can see from this diagram, that we become an aging society in the year 2000, and by 2019, we become 14%, that is, we become age. And this also coincided with some of the committees that were formed to examine the problems of the aged, which was once called, and rather we want to explore how we can harness the resources that is scarce in Singapore. Now, aging population and falling fertility had a direct outcome that is a lead to a shrinking workforce. Many people, the alarmists, were saying that that aging population is going to have a lot of negative impact. The non-alarmist economist, Michael Herman, had a different view. I really like what he said, that demography is not destiny and can be shaped by policies. And this is evident in the Singapore's experience as tripartism as a fire came out to deal and tackle with this issue of shrinking workforce. Now, this is a summary of what had happened to Singapore in terms of senior employment. Now, strategic and forward-looking policy, these innovations have uplifted employment rates of senior workers, as highlighted by Dr. Koh, particularly for those aged 60 to 64. As you can see from this slide, over the last 3 decades, employment rate of older workers aged 60 to 64 increased by 35% point. And for workers aged 55 to 59, it increased by 29%. Okay. Now, in comparison to the countries shown in the figure here, Singapore has done very well in maintaining employment of senior workers, achieving a rate of 71% today, which is higher and surpasses the OECD average of 63%. While Japan leads with the highest senior employment rate of 78%, Singapore's rate is still 8 percentage points lower than Japan. This indicates that we still have potential for further improvement in terms of our senior employment. This slide summarizes the senior employment rate. We can see from here that with each iteration of policies targeting at retirement and also re-employment, we see an uptick in senior employment. as indicated by the red line. The dotted line that you see here highlight the tripartite partners' effort in its policy recommendation to help older workers stay employed. In what follow, there are actually the tripartite partners in action is in 4 important stages. One in 1993, where we see the legislation of retirement age. 1995, the extension of retirement age. But in order to get a bigger boost on senior employment, the re-employment policy had a big impact, but it was a long road to 2012. So 2005, the TRICOM was commissioned to study re-employment, but it's not until 2012 that the re-employment legislation was passed. In order to even harness the older workforce, the Tripartite Work Group on Older Workers was commissioned in 2018. I'm going to delve into the detail in a while. So the objective for policy innovation in the labor market by Tripartism include, 1, to prepare older workers that is a readiness for re-employability, and policy had to be adaptable to changing environment. Okay, that is a key thing that we want to do. And Tripartism partners in action was seen as early as, what is it, 17? Okay, right. Here, as early as 1980s, when Singapore was still a young nation, committees were already set up to study ways and means of getting people to continue working beyond 55. Many of us are very aware of the Howe study that was in 1983-84. The recommendation was very visionary at that time, and many of the recommendations was too bold and was very costly for the committee chair in recommending all this tough rule. So among it is to stop CPF withdrawal lump sum at age 55. That was totally unpopular, and the thought about re-employment was also floated at that time. Increasing retirement age to 65, that was a recommendation, and it was too much for the people of Singapore at that time. I also thought that one reason why the Howe recommendation didn't quite make it into implementation stage is that there was a lack of tripartism in that committee. Yeah. Here we can see that the tripartite partners collaborated in a series of committees to address issues related to senior employment. The distinctive feature from the Howe committee is that all these committees had collaborated with a sense of collective responsibility and a unified understanding. There was a mutual trust and respect to negotiate outcome for shared benefits for employers, for workers, and the Singapore economy as a whole. So former NTUC DSG Mr. Ling Swee called this the win-win-win outcome. Win for the workers, win for the employers, and win for Singapore economy. Now, we have seen this, but we're going to zero in here. The first major milestone is the legislation of the retirement age to 60 in 1993, followed by the extension of retirement age in 1999, as you can see in this dotted line. Employment rate of older workers increased by 6 percentage points for the older worker, age 60 to 64, and that is like a slightly, but the employment rate creation for those older workers at age 55 to 59 was slightly lower than 6%, at 5.6%. So in June, let's reflect on the process of the retirement age legislation. So in June 1980, the Ministry of Labour at that time proposed raising the retirement age from 55 to 60 to address labour shortage, as we have heard from Dr. Koh. But Singapore at that time was not ready for mandatory retirement age. Employers are quite happy to adopt flexible structure. Some employers said that they are already hiring workers beyond 55, so there was no need to have a mandatory retirement age. It took a long time to negotiate. So in 1988, the government focused its strategy on how to keep older workers employed by encouraging employers to voluntarily raise the retirement age beyond 55. So a 3-year time period was set to allow employer to voluntarily implement retirement age. Now, from the employer's perspective, increasing retirement age should not be mandatory, because it would mean that it is less flexible for them to match the job requirement to the suitability of older workers. Of course, for employers, the immediate concern was cost. A higher cost would be incurred if they retain workers that are not so productive, and there was also issue with higher medical costs for older workers. As mentioned by Dr. Koh, the prevailing workers' mindset at the time was to carry on with the colonial practice of retiring at age 55 and then withdraw the CPS savings lump sum. Okay? So that was a lot of obstacles at that time. The government consulted employers and unionists and to how to legislate retirement age. So I would say this was the beginning of tripartite collaboration to achieve a win-win-win solution. So Mr. Stephen Lee, who was at that time SNEF president, in the book Advancing Tripartism, I actually learned a lot from this book. He said that, yes, in principle, SNEF support the raising of retirement age, as even as an employer, there is a recognition that we can use more of this workforce instead of them remain economically inactive. And at that time, it's also, there's also a realization that retiring at age 55 was just too young compared to other industrialized countries. So the happy solution was achieved in 1993. So there was a survey conducted by the Ministry of Manpower. Recall the story is that the government nudged the employers to voluntarily implement retirement age. But a survey conducted in early 1992 by the Ministry of Manpower revealed that this effort did not achieve the desired success. Only 72% of the unionized companies had raised the retirement age to 60 or older, But the response for non-unionized companies was much less enthusiastic, with only 4.5% of non-unionized companies doing the same. Now, since the non-unionized sector is bigger, it means that overall, only 10% of only 10% of all companies surveyed had voluntarily increased the retirement age. So the government decided that legislation was needed to cover all companies and to extend the working life of all Singaporeans, whether you are in the unionized or the non-unionized sector. So to help allay the employer's concern that the minimum retirement age of 60 would impact cost competitiveness, the tripartite partners agreed to reduce CPF contribution of employees aged between 55 and 60 by 5 percentage points. That is the employer's contribution to the workers. In effect, that is a wage cut of 5%. But as in our Singapore spirit, workers and unions worked together and accepted that wage cut from 12.5% to 7.5%. And subsequently, it was reduced further. By 1994, employers' contribution to CPF had dropped to historical low of 4%. And over the years, it had also increased very gradually, right? So CPF contribution is seen to employer as a major component of labor cost. So the members of parliament, they engage with the grassroots. The concern from the ground is the withdrawal age of CPF. Yeah. So the legacy, the colonial legacy about withdrawing your CPF at age 55 still stuck there, right? So a compromise is reached. The CPF withdrawal age remain at 55. And SNAF actually was concerned that retirement age may not be suitable for certain employees due to the nature of the work. It could be like fixed contract employee. So the Ministry of Labour heard this concern and had created a list of worker categories that will be exempted from the new law. These include uniform and armed groups. This is for health and safety reasons, and also for older workers who are engaged in physically demanding work. They were also exempted from the retirement age legislation. Then there are also occupations that require specific attributes like dexterity, good eyesight. So this group of workers, they were also exempted at that point. Yeah. On the government side, there is always need for support. So the government sets up infrastructure to investigate and to conciliate complaints of retirement or unfair dismissal on account of age. So Dr. Lee Boon Yang said this very well, that in drafting the retirement bill, the ministry has consulted extensively with the employers and workers' representatives. So this is really in the spirit of tripartism. As we move towards 1995, we are aging really fast. And given that Singapore is a migrant society, the speed of aging is much faster than other countries like Japan. Yeah, because our pioneers, they came to Singapore in their teenage years. So within 50 years, they all became seniors. So this explains why aging issue is even more pressing for Singapore, given our history. So by 2005, it was clear that Singapore needed to adopt strategy to address the fast aging population. So TRICOM 2005 was tasked to identify the challenges affecting the employability of older workers. And their task look beyond just increasing retirement age. Also were tasked to look at measures like job redesign, new employment arrangement, reviewing wage and benefit structure, and enhancing and upgrading skills for older workers. Additionally, TRICOM was also tasked to formulate a broad strategy to shift perceptions and attitudes among both employers and employees. So retirement age was extended by 1995, and TRICOM started to look at alternative model, which Dr. Koh had mentioned, the re-employment model. The TRICOM members made several study trips to Japan. The key takeaway was that the workers in Japan had a strong desire to continue working, and they took pride in their jobs. They also observed that Japanese employers were more proactive in retaining their older workers, and they engaged the older workers prior to re-employment. Ms. Cham, who shared with us her experience, recounted the trip in Japan where she visited Seiko and saw that the work environment was pretty age-friendly. And upon talking to some of these Japanese workers, they were not fearful of being retrenched, because they know that even though they don't have a retirement age, they can continue to work as much as they want. Overall, the society is also more appreciative and respect older workers. So re-employment concept was like confined to those people in the committee, but the public, they have not heard of re-employment. And it was a challenge, actually, to communicate this concept of re-employment to the public. So in 2007, the TRICOM prepared a recommendation. They have 4 key recommendations, and on top of that, they also recommended the government legislate the re-employment, right? And this was announced in the NDR 2007 by then Prime Minister Lee. He said that we are legislating not to further delay the retirement age, but to require employers to offer re-employment to workers. So it's a kind of a change in mindset of how the concept that you can be employed in a different role. So it's not necessarily same pay, same job. It can be different pay, different job, right? But implementation-wise, it's very challenging. So the tripartite work group set up an implementation group. And this is in response to Prime Minister Lee's announcement of re-employment legislation. The TRICOM, this implementation group was chaired by SNEF, Vice President at the time. Now, the implementation group focused on re-employment implementation issue and help, I think particularly is very important, is to help companies make early preparation to put in place re-employment practices before the legislation was enacted. Now, I think in the Parliament, then Labour Prime Minister MP Halimah Yacob also queried the government on strategies to prevent employers from discriminating against older workers. So to promote fair workplace practices and to address discrimination against older workers, TAFET was formed. Right? TAFET represented all three tripartite partners to promote age-friendly hiring practices. So it was a 5-year journey from the publication or the recommendation by the TRICOM 2005, which the report came out in 2007, and TRICOM recommended 5-year notice period to prepare the workers and to prepare the employers for this new re-employment arrangement. In fact, apart from Japan, Singapore is the only country that uses a re-employment model. So I think this model was like totally unfamiliar to the workers and to the employers, and much time is needed to prepare the ground for re-employment. So during this time, the government introduced policies, a funding framework under Advantage to help fund employers in their HR preparedness to hire older workers. So many companies utilize this fund to provide training for older workers before they reach retirement, and to support the implementation of HR policies and systems. And I think what is notable is that the government, being the largest employer, led by example by implementing re-employment ahead of legislation. I think that is a very unique Singapore model. And for tripartism to work, it's necessary to have a strong leadership in policy. Then NTUC was being concerned about the well-being of the worker and being on the ground. They were aware that re-employment can only happen if the worker are fit to work. So 2 policies were rolled out. One is the U-Health policy and the senior employment guidance, to prepare older workers to continue employment. SNAF played its part by conducting a lot of re-employment coaching and mentoring workshops. So we can see the win-win-win outcome here. And the re-employment from 62 to 67 happened in when it's implemented in 2012, and you look at the figure after it had been revised upward from, instead of re-employment to 65, it was increased to 67, and later it was increased to 68, and you can see the labor market response, which is very, very favorable. Of course, there is a dip due to COVID, but we are on track to see an uptick in senior employment. Finally, I think it's important that tripartism adapt to evolving environment. As we come into the 2020 and beyond, the main key issue is about aging. And then on top of that, we have a lot of uncertainty in the economic environment. So tripartism need to adapt, and there is a need to work even harder, as I think I'm running out of time. I want to show you DPM Heng's, what he said, that strong tripartism is needed to provide sufficient upskilling and reskilling pathway. And as we all know, DPM Heng is the chair of the Committee for Future Economy, and we're going to see a lot of disruption in employment. And this is, all the more we need the tripartisan fire to even go stronger. Yeah. Do I still have time? Yeah, because they were waving to me. Yeah. So, but I still like to go back to the work group, because I think this work group is really quite comprehensive. And unlike other work group, I think it's tasked to look further ahead and broader. So the recommendation is for Singapore in the year 2030s, and it embraces different aspects of the labor market and the ecosystem. So it's just not addressing cost concern, but also to remove barriers, to create age-friendly environment. And we also talk about productive longevity at this time, and also about intergenerational workplace that value older workers. Okay. So all these are the key recommendations. These recommendations were, 22 recommendations were made and all were accepted. Yeah. I think what is important is that it's visionary to raise retirement age, but the committee is fully aware that you can't do this alone, and therefore it calls for a step-by-step approach. Yeah. We know the target, but we don't have to rush there. So this is a stark contrast to the House report that we mentioned earlier. So a step-by-step approach is needed to raise retirement age and even to raise the CPF contribution rate. And the rate had to be done, increase had to be done in consultation with the unions and also with SNF. So Dr. Koh had mentioned this. I will skip this. So finally, it's important to have adaptability, the willingness and ability of employers, union, and workers to adapt themselves over the years, to adopt and to accept rising retirement and re-employment ages. Then there is also a need for government to adapt policies to support and to cater to a changing workplace profile. Yeah. So the future of aging workforce call for even stronger spirit of tripartism. Tripartism has been a cornerstone of Singapore's labor market. So this did not just happen by chance. It is because of deliberate, considered, and purposeful effort built on trust and openness. So tripartism must continue to evolve and adapt to remain relevant. I think the key thing is to remain relevant, to ensure that it continues to deliver a win-win-win outcome. So there's a need to also engage not only in economic policy, but also social policy to create a senior-friendly environment and also to create an intergenerational workforce. Okay, so I think, so I come to my end of my case studies, and I like to acknowledge that I receive a lot of insight and a lot of help from the Ministry of Manpower, NTUC, SNF, Tripartite Alliance, and especially the interviews. Really thank all the interviewees for taking time to answer the questions and to clarify a lot of things that you can't read. Yeah. For example, like the Japan trip is something that is not well documented. Yeah. So of course, my research assistant, my PhD student, Lim Kia Yi. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Chia. Right, thank you, Dr. Chia. That was really insightful and would provide a good context for our panel discussion, which Dr. Chia will be facilitating, right? Okay, now we've come up to tea break with refreshments in the foyer. So I'll first like to just invite Dr. Koh and our guest in the front row to take the lead, right? And then the rest of us will follow. I have some instructions for them. Right, for the rest of you, just before you proceed, I'd just like to draw your attention to the QR code again right? This is where you can ask questions for the panel discussion, right? And you can also participate in the activity to reflect on how we can create opportunities to support senior workers and what is important in the future of tripartism to ensure Singapore's continued success. So you can view all your responses in the word cloud outside in the foyer. So with that, I now invite everyone to proceed to join Dr. Koh in the foyer. Okay, so for this panel-themed journey and supporting our senior workers, we would like to invite SMS, Dr. Koh Poh Koon, Deputy Secretary General, NTUC, Mr. Heng Chi Hao, and Vice President SNEF, Mr. John Ng, to join Dr. Chia on stage. So this panel will be talking about the role of tripartism in driving the development of the retirement and re-employment policies, challenges faced along the way, key factors leading to the successful implementation, how tripartite partners collaborated to enable employers and workers to be ready, re-employable, and adaptable. So over there you can see the QR code. Once again, if you have any questions, just scan the QR code, post your questions there. But if you would prefer to speak, just raise your hands and one of our ushers would come to you with the microphone. So with that, I'll just hand over the stage to Dr. Chia. Dr. Chia, please.
Good afternoon. I think we are all refreshed after the tea break. Welcome back to the dialogue. I have earlier presented the case study showcasing the important role tripartism play in ensuring success and sustainability of retirement and re-employment policies. Today, right now, we have an opportunity to hear this directly from the tripartite partners who have played key roles as Singapore navigates its retirement and re-employment policies amidst demographic shift and economic challenges. Allow me to introduce our distinguished guests, each representing a partner in the tripartism. First, of course you all know him. Yeah. NTUC,
hi, I'm Chi Hao from NTUC.
Yeah, NTUC DSG, Mr. Heng Chi Hao. And we heard from SMS, Dr. Koh Poh Koon, and SNEF Vice President, Mr. John Ng. Allow me to share with you their CV, a short one. I condensed. No need, right? Okay, no need. Yeah, because I have to condense the long CV into a few paragraphs. So in the interest of time, we can start the dialogue going. Yeah. So the floor is now open. Oh, we got some questions here. I like this question. What are instances where tripartite partners disagree and how are they resolved? I think this is a very, very good question. We can take the response from each one of you in turn.
Actually, tripartite partners always disagree. Although we sit on top here, we always think that we are all pals and friends, but we always disagree. I think it's naturally so, because all of us has got very, very different interests. From the employer perspective, there are interests related to cost of doing business in Singapore is too high, cost competitiveness of our workers, whether is it there or not, the skills and development of our people. Related to retirement and re-employment age, asking employers to hire older workers, we are also worried about succession planning, organization flexibility and capability building, and so on and so forth. Now, employees will also have their own interests. There are common interests and there are also opposing interests, and in the areas of opposing interests, it takes a much longer time to come to a consensus. So when you look at the reports, the 3 reports that's being published, the time when the committee was formed and the time when the report was out, averagely it takes about 20 months. And that 20 months is a lot of angst, a lot of deliberation, but most important, come to a conclusion that is win-win-win for everybody. In fact, in the first the first committee working on it, there was even a suspension that was recorded in the report that the various committee members have to bring back to his own members for deliberation and seek consensus within the members. So it's not always hunky-dory at the tripartite level, but we will try to make sure that we win because we have one common objective, how to make sure Singapore has got a stronger economy, a sustainable workforce going forward.
I agree with what Brother John said, that tripartite partners always have disagreement. That's the natural order of things. Because if there's no tension, then something is wrong, right? Because, as you said, 3 parties have somewhat different interests, and it can never be 100% the same. If the employer thinks that the employee something is completely wrong also, because they have interests that are quite polar, but yet at the same time, you need both to have some common ground so that actually they both ultimately want the success of the company. Because if the success of the company is not guaranteed, the employee don't have a job. If the company cannot make money, he cannot pay bonus or raise salary for the employee. So how do you then help convince each of the parties, which may start with a diverse viewpoints, to understand that at the end of the day, they all want the same thing. There is something common that they can go for. And this is how you shape common interests and find, I think just now the word cloud out there, you see mutual benefit, and it starts to create win-win. These are the big words out there on the word cloud I saw earlier. And this is how you try and bring consensus in a tripartite manner. Because in every policy or every move they want to make, it's actually like a medication, you know. Even the best medication in the world has side effects. Somebody won't benefit. There will be other people who benefit from that medication, and some people will get a side effect from it. Even the very mild and supposedly innocuous Panadol, there will be some people who get allergic also. And sometimes the stronger the policy, the more aggressive the policy, the stronger the medicine, the greater the side effect, like your chemotherapy drugs. It can kill the cancer, but can also kill you. So when we want to do sometimes very much needed policy, some policies are more painful than others, just like a chemotherapy drug. And how do you then convince the patient that this is something that basically like poison they must take? Because why? The patient wants to get better. And so if you want to get better, you must swallow the bitter pill. And know that you have to ride through a bit of a storm, but see that in the future, there is longevity for you if you can weather through this period. And that's the kind of thing that the tripartite partners go through. A little bit of discussion, seeing the pros and cons, the side effect versus the good effects, and then deciding that what is the longer term aim we want to go to. We want to survive together and thrive and get better and not be killed by the cancer. And so what do we need to do in the short term? Okay, let's swallow that bitter pill. Let's see how to make the pain more bearable and the side effects more bearable for people. And this is where government comes in to say, well, if the pain is too much, can we support with some grants? Can we maybe pace out the implementation a little bit so that you don't take all the pain in day one, you can spread it out so that it's more bearable. And by staging it out, by finding that consensus and the middle path, we actually make a difficult problem come to a solution at some point in time. So there's no, I would say there are times that we completely agree on many things, but there are also a lot of times, even those we agree, they will be at the fringe issues that we have to fight over as well.
In the spirit of showing that what my 2 partners say is true, I must disagree with them. But I almost wanted to, but then Po Koon came in the last bit. Just wanted to let colleagues here know, there are many areas in which there is immediate alignment of interest. So if the interests are aligned, then we don't disagree. But there are also areas where, although we all know that we want to hit a particular common destination, but if you look at it from each of our perspectives, then we have worries. So the question is, I don't mind going there with you. The question is, how can my worries be adequately addressed, just like your worries be adequately addressed? Now, this is the part where we might have different ideas, and that is where the coming together of minds to find those win-win solutions. Not every solution is win-win. Some solutions, some options may be win-lose, and it's not doable, and then you have to then sift through and see which are the ones. And that's the part that takes time, but that's the part that also calls up that spirit of doing it together. And the idea is that why do you bother to do together? It must be because if you look longer term, ultimately it serves every partner's interest to do that. Then it makes sense, yeah.
Thank you for sharing this. I think it's okay to disagree, but ultimately, you have to agree, right? So that is the process of deliberation. Yeah, you can agree to disagree, right? Yeah. But I think the very fact that there's some disagreement shows that there are some interests that need to be ironed out until finally you iterate to a common interest, to a collective interest. So thank you for your response. There is a strong vote on this that I really like to ask the panel. Do you have the experience that when you go to a supermarket and you see a few queues, and then you thought, oh, that is the shortest queue, I'll go for it. But lo and behold, when you're there, you're served by an older, slower worker. It seems like there's a societal mindset that you try to avoid being served by older workers. So there's a question here that how to change the mindset of employers that older employees are slower and unable to adapt. I think we are all guilty of it, right? From the societal point of view. How about from the...
If I may
start
sure. This way this time. Just now we were talking about TAFEP, and I was involved in TAFEP together with Mr. Bob Tan for many years. And I recall that one of the initiatives was to take certain advertisements over radio as part of their education. And I remember this one, it applies to this scenario. So what happened was you're listening to radio, and then there's a very beautiful piece of classical music. Then after that, there was a question. So everybody listening, it will probably be thinking, the question must be, what's the name of this piece of music? Who's the composer? But the question was, tell me the age of the player. Well, obviously, you can't do that because it was over the radio. You can't even guess, right? So therefore, I don't know the answer. So the point that was being made was that actually what is important, what is relevant in that situation, as in many situations, is actually the performance. And if the performance is good, then age is not relevant, right? So the issue really is that we should avoid taking an ideological approach to things. That means to say that age equals no good, or age equals good. And the reality is anybody who has run organizations, you will know, you take any age. Among the younger age groups, are there lousy workers? The answer is yes. Are there very good ones? The answer is yes. You take the older age group, are there very good ones? The answer is yes. Are there very lousy ones? The answer is yes. So therefore, the performance there's a spectrum, there's a spread, and it's not primarily necessarily driven by any one factor, including by age. So I think the person looking for the right queue and then seeing that he's joined the queue that's moving slowly, I think really the question to put is what can be done to improve the performance of that process or the person doing it. And even if the person doing it is older, I think one need not necessarily assume that it is because of the age, or that you see the next queue, somebody looking the same age is moving very quickly, and you say that it's so abnormal. It shouldn't be like this.
My experience is that the shorter queue sometimes take longer because the one in front has a lot of things to buy. Sometimes I make the mistake of going to the shortest queue that takes the longest because the further in front got a biggest cut. Yeah, so not always the cashier's problem. It's sometimes also other factors involved, which illustrates the fact that sometimes it's also not the worker's fault. Actually, the employers need to redesign the jobs to make it more conducive, or maybe redeploy the worker to another position that actually suits his or her experience and her ability to cope as well. Right? So it is actually more of a leadership problem, not a worker's problem. You are the boss of the company. If you don't know how to deploy your workers properly or equip them or redesign the thing to make them work better, actually, you bear the responsibility too as an employer. Of course, the workers must also be prepared to learn new things, to use new technologies, for example, to increase the productivity. So actually, both hands must clap. Right? But I wouldn't say that it's always the employer's problem or it's also just the worker's problem alone.
So how to change the mindset of employees? Is that change the mindset of employers?
Yes.
Okay. So if you're not so sure how to change the mindset of employers, go to SNAF, join SNAF. Correct, SNAF? Correct. Now more serious. Changing the mindset of anything, whether it's an employer, employee, takes time. And in Singapore, the conversation of training, reskilling has been ongoing for the last 20-odd years. In fact, the PM speech just on Sunday mentioned a lot about training, reskilling, and putting a lot of money into our bank account for that purpose. So from Singapore, we are fortunate to have the top leadership telling us, cajoling us about what training and development is all about, what skilling and reskilling is all about. And it is imperative for leaders in the organization to continue with that conversation. And that takes time. My personal experience is that if you don't want to join SNAF, you also can join the union. Because my personal experience is that we work with the union on the CTC. And the CTC encourages both the workers as well as the supervisors to come together for a solution. And through that, the workers are now a lot enlightened on what are the things to relook and look at and see how we can actually make greater improvements from that perspective. So the resources are available from the government, from SNAF, and also from the union on how we can actually help employers step up in terms of changing the mindset of our employees, right? So if you go to Rohe, which is actually run in house in E2 High, one of the causes that they have been teaching is about communication. How do you communicate with our staff? How do you communicate with your supervisor on what is good for them, what is good for the organization? I think through communication, with the mindset that we want to skills and reskills, and with a lot of money coming in from the system to help us skills and reskill, we should be on the way to success. That's my personal opinion. Thank you.
Let me just add one thing. Actually, fundamentally, the mindset problem is one of disbelief. Right? So how do you help somebody overcome their perception and their disbelief? And I think in this particular aspect, my experience with unions when I was there for a couple of years has been that it's quite useful to bring people on the learning journey. Help them see that it's possible elsewhere. And then people say, actually I thought it's not possible, but actually how come this worker can do? So by going on a learning journey, you create a community of practice and sharing that actually workers start to see other workers of the same profile being able to take on technology and do it. And say, if you can do it, then why can't I? So this is the kind of mindset shift that helps workers to change. Employers are the same as well. Bringing together a group of companies and employers of similar profile that has undertaken that change to actually equip the senior workers to take on jobs that they otherwise wouldn't have been able to imagine them doing, helps other employers to see that older workers can do those jobs as well. You will never imagine a 60-odd-year-old, not so educated auntie, a production operator now operating a production line with 4 autonomous robots assembling equipment. How can this auntie work with automation and Industry 4.0 robots? But actually, when you bring people to see that it can be done in a particular company, you realize that the interface is only an iPad. She doesn't even need to know how to fix those robotic arms. She just needs to press 3 buttons on the iPad. She can control all the 4 robots on this production line. And you help people to make that quantum leap and connect the dots and say, if I can use an iPhone and an iPad, I actually can control robots. Young or old, it's only in the finger. It's nothing to do with your age or your strength. It's just pressing a few buttons on the iPad. So by showing people the possibility, both employers and employees can actually start to see possibilities and not just obstacles. So that's the lesson I learned in my 2 years in the union.
Is there a hand up there? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, my name is Bunki. I'm from MOM. I just want to find out, have this re-employment concept. I know we have implemented re-employment, extension of retirement age, but what about having part-time re-employment as one of the main options, rather than currently it is something like it's a last choice, whereby you cannot agree, therefore no choice, you go for re-employment, part-time re-employment. I ask this because I find that lifestyle change, akin to mindset change, takes a long time. It is difficult for employees to suddenly become unemployed from full-time employment, whereby they will have problems to find time to slowly adapt. Suddenly you have so much time, don't know what to do with it. And that's probably why I would say that, as what Dr. Koh has said, there's this sudden drastic decline of people who suddenly go to retirement stage. So just want to suss out your views on this. Thanks. Oh, sorry, I also want to add that I thought that this part-time employment also helps the employer, in a sense that there's this issue of a gradual knowledge transfer. I mean, rather than someone just leave with short notice, at least with this part-time employment, you allow this person about to be fully retired to transfer his or her knowledge and experience over to whoever taking over can have the luxury of time to slowly weave in. Thank you.
Part-time re-employment is allowed. And in fact, we even have a grant for that. It's called a part-time re-employment grant, with the premise that the employer must undergo a session of structured career planning with the person you want to adopt this grant. So actually, the re-employment doesn't need to be a full-time re-employment. It can be part-time as well, to meet the needs of because not every older person wants to work full-time, as you correctly said. So actually, the part-time re-employment grant was also to nudge employers to consider a part-time re-employment, and so it is allowed.
So re-employment not necessarily is same term, same pay. It can be different term, different
not even
pay.
same load.
Yeah, different pay, different term.
Not even same job. So it can be, as my example in a HDB person shows that this person actually has been re-rolled a few times, twice actually, and then taken on a slightly different job from an estate manager to an operations type of parking operations manager. So, and then while he was doing a part-time job, he actually came in as an advisor to help guide the junior, younger estate managers acclimatize to their new jobs.
Any more questions from the floor? Oh, yes.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Munir Sham from TADM. My question is, if we are all age blind, why is there a need to even have a number called 70? Are you all prepared to look at the day when we need not even specify the age for retirement and that we leave it open? How receptive are you, to any one of you, with this idea?
I think not having a retirement age may not necessarily be a good thing for the employee at all, you know. Just imagine you have no retirement age. It actually means that your company can tell you, thank you very much, anytime they want. So not necessarily is a good thing. But I think more important is that having a retirement age allows people to plan, both the employer as well as the employee. Now, if both sides has got a conversation and discussion on working beyond a certain age group, nothing in the system, whether it's going to be retirement age or re-employment age, to stop you from, or stop the company or the employer for seeking employment thereafter. So it may not necessarily be a good thing that we scrape retirement age altogether.
Actually, if you think after your retirement age, right now we say that employers are obliged to offer re-employment up to, say 67, eventually 68, and then 70. The truth is that actually after your retirement age, many of the offered re-employment may go on a yearly or so contract basis anyway, which means to say actually at any point in time, both sides can mutually part ways, right? And actually, it also means that even if you reach 70 and you are in the pink of health, you are contributing to the company, there's no reason why the company won't offer you to go beyond 70 because in maybe a different role even, or because you have even more experience than to tap on your experience to actually guide the younger ones. So it is actually up to mutual discussion to see how you can best contribute even beyond 70. There's nothing to say that once you reach the 70 years, which is what eventually we want to stipulate at 2030, you should therefore stop there if both sides can agree on what to do next. Yeah, right. But it provides flexibility for both sides.
Thanks. My take is this, and this gives me an opportunity also to make a small clarification via Professor's presentation earlier. In some of the slides, she referred to that we have a mandatory retirement age. I just wanted to clarify, we have a statutory retirement age and not a mandatory retirement age. In some other countries, when they say their retirement age is X years old, they really do mean a mandatory retirement age, means to say that right up to that age, finish, that's it, you know. It's not just a question of choice, it's really a question of no choice, that the whole country, that is it. In our case, actually, our statutory retirement age is not designed that way. It's actually designed to provide a safety net so that any company that retires an employee by setting a company policy that retires its employees below the statutory retirement age would be not complying with the law. Okay? But it doesn't say that if a company chooses to employ a person above the statutory retirement age that the company has done anything illegal. Far from it, it gets an incentive. So ours is really like a valve. It protects one way, but actually it frees the other way. So that is one. So in other words, today, there's nothing stopping any company where they see the value in a particular worker or particular skill set or particular need within its profession that they want to keep, for example, certain technical skills, you know, hard to find and all that, from offering employment well beyond the statutory retirement age and indeed beyond the re-employment age. And there are indeed companies that have done away with the company level retirement age as well. So I would say that to be that age blind mindset that Sir you referred to, I would say that it is a aspiration that we want to push on with and hope that one day all companies will adopt that. But at the same time, we must also know that it is not without condition. The worker must be able to do the job. The worker must be able to have the health to be able to do the job. So subject to that, then we certainly want to promote efforts in that area. But there are already examples where companies do so and where the workers themselves see the value of continuing and they are doing so.
Thank you, Mr. Heng, for sharing the progressive understanding of retirement age. Yeah, that is really very encouraging. Probably we can move on. Any more questions? If not, there's 19 votes for this question. Maybe I will read it. Given the evolving business landscape, can we use flexibility of not offering re-employment to manage surplus versus making employees redundant? So,
actually, today we don't have surplus. We have a very tight labor market. And that's the reason why you want to encourage more labor participation in the older workers and even in females and homemakers as well. So actually, it is not an issue of surplus, actually. It is actually a tight labor market with an aging workforce. I'm not sure what the question is trying to get because we are not managing surplus.
Yeah.
Because if you have surplus, of course, then you say you want to retrench somebody, but that's not exactly what the policy for senior workers are designed to do. It's actually designed to encourage more continued employment of older workers. And actually, beyond the retirement age, if you find that there's no more job role for this person, you need not offer further re-employment beyond the initial contract, for example. Yeah, so that's the kind of construct that is available today already.
If I may go back to my classical music thing, what if all the older workers in this company are your best performers, And if you think that you have to downsize the workforce for whatever reason, and you go and cut away your best performers, and then you keep those that are younger, but you know for a fact that their performance is not very good, and if you are running the company, I think what the company ought to be looking at is whether or not they are wrongly employing a particular manager. Okay, so you have to think what serves the purpose of that organization best, and then go on the basis. I think that would probably be more sensible. Yeah.
Any more questions from the floor? We have proceeded to the next question that received 17 votes. With the increasing of retirement age, medical costs is also increasing. What and how the government will do to allow companies to be more sustainable?
Actually, in the past, many companies have to retain workers by offering some health benefits and maybe even health insurance. Today, with a nationalized MediShield Life, effectively, every Singaporean worker has a basic medical insurance already covered for them, which means actually that some of these medical care costs is technically already taken out from the employer's hands. Whatever the employer wants to offer is actually on top of MediShield Life, because the way the insurance system, medical insurance is designed here, is that if you buy IP plans, it's actually riding on top of the foundational tier of MediShield Life. And if employers choose not to add on that tier, actually most of Singaporean workers, PRs, are already well covered by MediShield Life. Right? So actually, in some way, we have actually provided, therefore, portable medical insurance for all Singapore and PR employees here in Singapore. And if the employer wants to actually then support employees to make sure that whatever insurance plan they subscribe to is portable, actually they can find a way to help them offset some premium for their IP plans, which the employee can choose to take on their own if they leave this company and continue servicing the premium. But if you think about what they are providing now as a basic tier, MediShield Life is very good already for adequate medical care in the subsidized wards. Yeah, so I think that is one way in which, with an aging population, we ensure there's good medical care for our broad population, but also make the medical costs for many companies hiring older workers sustainable.
Yeah, I think high medical costs, especially so for older workers, is one of the greatest and serious concern for all employees, our employers as well. If you look at all the 3 reports dated over the last 30 years on this tripartite work group on older workers and extension of retirement age and so on and so forth, one of the common discussion point is actually on medical, the high cost of medical. If given a chance, everything is reset. The best medical is don't buy medical insurance, because MediShield Life covers you. When MediShield Life covers you, then the question is, if you want to top up to first class, A class, or whatever class it is, you can then buy your insurance to top up. That is the best. But unfortunately, this is not so, because when we join different companies offer different medical insurance and medical benefits. If you join the likes of Google, they give you so good a medical benefit, but you cannot leave the organization. The minute you leave your organization, all your medical benefit disappeared. And you join the next company, and especially so when you join the next company who say, no, you cover your own insurance, go and buy your own insurance. Then you realize that when you start buying your own insurance, your insurance company will have disclaimer say, oh, I won't be covering your high blood pressure, I won't be covering you for this and this and this. So I think in Singapore, we have the very, very basic medical insurance that covers all, which is the MediShield Life. And I think on top of that, if you are young, buy a topper to top up to the medical needs that you have. Now, this issue has been discussed for the longest time, for the last 30 years. And personally, when I first joined the company, the scheme is called CCS, Comprehensive Don't Know What Insurance, where the company covers you everything. You're so happy. Halfway through, the company realizes things are too expensive. So any new joinee coming in will be on a co-sharing basis, which means inpatient, the company will give you about $300 for outpatient, and for inpatient, they'll top up about 1 or 2% of your MediShield. All right? So you have a two scheme running in some of the organization, and I think in many of the organization, many of these are having two scheme. But it is a painful process that we transit from one to another. I think it's an issue that we will be discussing, and we will continue to discuss how can we make medical insurance most efficient in Singapore. So it's not a problem that we have already solved.
I just wanted to complement the comments by my two partners over here, because the question relates to what's the government doing in order to help to make it more sustainable. So what Pokun and John were talking about is that when something happens and you have to pay a bill, whether directly or through insurance, then these arrangements. But actually, just 2 points. One is that if you look back, the 55-year-old today, on average, is in better condition than the 55-year-old of 30 years ago, 50 years ago, on average. So there is an improvement due to nutrition, treatment, and so on. But note that the government is also investing big time in programs like Healthier SG, Age Well SG. And these are not just slogans, these are real initiatives, real efforts, real resourcing. The idea is that if you can uplift the health of our population, even as we age, then you will keep up this advantage, right? That means, like what Pokun said just now, right? The 50 now is the new 40, right? And so on. So it is a virtuous thing. And if that is the case, then the cost, if you think about it, for a company employing a person of whatever age, the risk will actually be reduced. And then over and above that, all those things about the insurance that have been shared. Yeah, thank you.
No, but you must realize also that actually a lot of companies use these insurance schemes as a way to entice employees. So actually, in some way, it's not sustainable because you are trying to compete by trying to offer very, very comprehensive health coverage, which is premiums are affordable when the employee is young. But as in all health insurance, the moment you reach a certain age, the premiums will shoot up anyway, regardless of whether this is bought by a company or bought by yourself. And that's the reason why we went into MediShield Life. Right? And in that way, MediShield Life should, I would say, is actually very comprehensive. It's not actually a very basic plan. It's a basic tier. The other things can add on, but it's not a very basic plan. It covers everything. And in fact, MediShield Life covers what private insurance don't. It covers the disease from the day you are born, even congenital diseases, which a lot of insurance actually don't cover because you cannot buy before you are born. So the moment you are born, you have it, they won't cover you already. Whereas MediShield Life guarantees from day one you are born, whatever you're born with, we cover. And actually, it covers all pre-existing illnesses, including cancers. You will not be denied just because you strike cancer one time. Because most insurance plans, once you get a payout for one disease, sorry, they don't cover you when you get a second cancer. But MediShield Life will cover you again and again, whatever you get, wherever you are. So this is something that is quite unique that actually a lot of people don't realize what MediShield Life does. And I think you should have confidence that if companies can look at the way they provide health benefits and try to align themselves and make themselves sustainable, they should see how they can ride on MediShield Life to enhance other benefits rather than try to compete with each other into unsustainable future by trying to outdo each other and pay more and more. Because that's the reality of medical insurance. You will just get more expensive as you get older.
All right. The medical cost inflation is always driven by increase in insurance premium. So when we talk about medical costs, it's just not the treatment costs, but very much related to the insurance cost. Yeah, so I thank you for answering this question. I think there's a pressing question on, is there any assistance to companies for those who continue to hire above age 70?
I don't think we have anything specific. There's a senior employment grant, credit, senior employment credit for anybody above, 65 or something? Or 60, I can't remember. There's no upper limit to the senior employment credit, right? But actually, I think above 70, company don't look at just whether you're more costly, they also look at what you bring to the table. So it's really not just about cost per se, but it's about what is the value you have that you bring onto the table. Already, our policy requires companies to contribute less on the employer CPF part. Because once you reach above 65, the CPF contribution rate is lower than the younger employee. So there is some degree of cost adjustment to the company's wage cost. But ultimately, it's about, if you're above 70, what is your contribution? Yeah, not so much as just cost per se. If you are somebody who can actually bring a lot of value, actually then you're worth it. But if you have no value, if you have 30 years old and no value, also they won't employ you. So I think age, again, should not be the defining characteristics, but what is the offer you bring?
I think we're good with this. Next question related to the implementation of the re-employment. What is government's stand if employers were to review re-employment for employees year-on-year basis versus straight-up offer of 5 years? Is that acceptable? I think currently a lot of companies offer re-employment year-on-year. So the question is whether it's possible to get a straight-up offer of 5 years, and this would give certainty to the employees.
It is meant to be flexible, so it's acceptable, but it allows both parties to negotiate what exactly the person is required to do in terms of scope, volume of work, and duration. So some companies offer yearly, some offer 2 years, and then if you are really highly valuable, they're scared you cannot poach by the next one, then maybe 5 years. So again, there's no one size fits all here. It's really about the individual and the company's need for the worker at that point in time. But it is acceptable. Because you see, if we say it must be straight up 5 years, but the company will say, but if I put you on this reduced scope, I also don't know whether I need you for 5 years. Then in that case, then maybe I shouldn't offer. So if you make it too strict and too inflexible, actually you reduce opportunities for both to come to an agreement on what will work for both as well. And who's to say that even though a company may offer you 5 years, by the time you're 72, you may say, my third grandchild being born, I want to spend more time with the grandchild. Can I now actually work a bit more part-time, change the terms, but cannot lock in already, then how? So, situation changes for both parties. So I think it's worthwhile to just keep it flexible for both to negotiate. But if both can agree that this is the interim, you want to do 2 years, 3 years, there's no reason why not.
Yeah, from my understanding of the reading is that re-employment is a preferred model because it offers more flexibility as compared to like you increase your retirement age to 70, right? So now we still have a statutory retirement age and then re-employment after that. That will allow flexibility both for the employer and also for the workers. Yeah. Any other questions from the floor? Am I missing any hand? No? Okay. We move up to this question with 8 votes here. Given that we are moving towards a super age workforce, would the tripartite partners consider every company to have minimum percentage of senior workers?
I would say, in trying to solve problems, we should not look at what is the simplistic and obvious answer. Usually, in medicine, we always say what looks simple and obvious usually is the wrong answer and the wrong treatment. Because if it's so simple, everyone in the world would have done it long ago. Right? And it all depends on what the company's work requirements are as well. So you can imagine we put this, say all construction companies have a minimum number of senior workers. Can you imagine in a blue-collar industry, you mandate all the 70-year-olds still be climbing the scaffolds and doing the hard labor work? I think that's quite difficult because then you're constraining the company and it's not operationalable. So if you cannot be operationalized, then actually that thing becomes a restriction rather than ability to help. But on the other hand, sometimes you value more experienced senior nurses who can provide better and better care. So actually the proportion of senior nurses and older nurses may well work in a clinic. So you have to let the industry and the company decide what actually works for them. It has to make sense. So you cannot be a one-size-fits-all and say that there must be a fixed proportion in every company. And first of all, the workers themselves might not want to continue working in that role. in that particular company. So you also cannot force the older worker to continue there when he may say, I want to take a different role, work in a different company, has a different pace. So you need to allow some market flexibility to play itself out.
John, you want? Because I can see the next question.
Yes.
So
yes.
I think it's related to the, see the next question is,
Change.
Oh, okay, change. Okay, there's this other question that says, are there any plans to increase the retirement age of those in the uniform groups? Okay, so I think it's related to this thing, you see. So for example, uniform groups, you might be thinking of SAF, you know, or you think of, let's say, the police force, right? And the sort of roles that we expect them to play to protect Singapore internally and then against external threats. So then, of course, we have an aging population, and supposing we were to implement the fixed percentage thing, right? So we mandate that the SAF must also have a certain proportion above 70, above 65 and all that, and all professions the same. Then we have to ask ourselves, is that the best way we expect the SAF to fulfill its mission, or for that matter, the police, you know? You can say that maybe, I'm not saying, you can imagine, oh, maybe the police operate within Singapore, so maybe since the whole Singapore is aging, then maybe you run a bit slower, the other guy also run a bit slower, maybe can, you know? I doubt so too, but certainly if you are looking at an external threat, just because you have an aging population doesn't mean that whoever wants to be nasty to us will necessarily configure their attacking force to match our demography, right? So we got to be practical, yeah.
Be careful what you ask for. Your ORD and MR date may also be older. So you may still come for reservists at 70 years old. So be careful. Please don't ask for the scary things. I'm happily MR already, please.
But there are ways in which you can combine. So again, you look at within the MINDEF family, for example, so we have military expert schemes, we have civilian schemes and all that. So for those, certainly the age requirements, the physical requirements are different, right? So therefore you can match accordingly, you see. So it's not a one-size-fits-all for sure.
In the interest of time, maybe we can take one more question from here before I pose a question to the panel. Any particular one that we should address? Yeah, I think we will do that. What are the key ingredients needed to enable tripartism to remain the secret weapon for Singapore? Yeah. Any new thing to add to the sauce?
This is so tripartism. Usually the two partners look at the Zheng Hu, then the Zheng Hu must do first before the other two partners do. But but in the spirit of tripartism, Zheng Hu will go first. I was just talking to a group of people earlier that actually a lot of people underappreciate what tripartism really means and how tripartism is what it is today in Singapore, right? So perhaps not everyone has a chance to interact with unions overseas or actually see how things happen overseas. But surely you read about in the papers about protests having, in many other countries, nurses also go on strike, doctors go on strike, transport workers go on strike every so often in Europe. If you have been caught in an airport before, you will know the frustration. And even hotel workers go on strike, right? Because I experienced that in US at one time. But these are things that we have taken for granted, which is a norm in many other places. But how did tripartism end up what it is today? Again, the word cloud out there says it all. Mutual benefit, mutual understanding, but it's the devotion of time and effort to actually build the relationship together through thick and thin. But what a lot of people don't realize also is that tripartism is also born out of the politics in which the country started. Many may not remember or even know that actually about half the number of people who convened the party, PAP, are actually unionists. So actually, the political party, PAP itself, actually started with roots in the union. Mr. Lee Kuan Yew himself was a lawyer that represented the unions and the workers in the early days of a lot of strife and strikes. And eventually, when he formed the party PAP, half the number of people who put their name down and convened the party, I think out of the 10 or 12 conveners, about 6 or 7 were actually about unionists. So about half were unionists. And actually that is a very important reason why tripartism is what it is today. Why the unions and the workers and the government and the employers can actually work closely together. Because Singapore, by DNA, is a very open economy. We've always been pro-business. But to have a government that is pro-business and pro-worker at the same time is very difficult because, as I said earlier, both workers and employers have somewhat different needs and different demands. So technically, there are already a tension between the two. But because this government started with the roots in the union, we are able to bring the union along and be pro-worker and pro-business at the same time. So it's just a simple thought experiment. If today we change government, so the symbiotic relationship that has existed between the ruling party that runs the government of the day and the union that actually strikes a balance for the workers' best interest is therefore no longer in existence in Singapore. A new government that has no relationship with the unions and the workers and the relationship, tripartite relationship with the employers. Can tripartism still survive? What would be the signal you send to the greater economy? That is a thought experiment. It's something worth thinking about, actually. Because this tripartism that we keep saying about has a deep reservoir of trust and mutual benefit that's built up over years of negotiation, even through strikes and hard-earned table banging. Right? And so this is something that hard to appreciate, and I think it deserves a little bit of thinking to imagine a future where tripartism is not what it is today. The other manifestation of tripartism, that mutual trust, is also not just at the negotiating table. I often joke that we have this tripartite golf thing that has gone on for about 30 years. But in most other countries, I think none of the employers want to be caught dead playing golf with the unionists, or the other way around. Because each of their constituents will say, you have sold me out. Why? Because the company is supposed to fight the unions, and unions are supposed to protest at the picket line against the employers. So if the union leader and the company leadership are playing golf, something is quite wrong somewhere, each will be very suspicious of each other. Your constituents will actually blame you and take you to task. Maybe you didn't negotiate my thing better. Maybe you pretend, but the fact is that we have such a deep reservoir of trust. You put two fellas standing there with the golf clubs, they're not swinging at each other's heads. They actually can spend a few hours together and not throttle each other or use the club to bash each other's head in. That itself is actually quite a unique thing. So it's not just fun and games. It actually is a reflection of the deep relationship that's built up over time. Right? So I think it's something that if you look beyond the surface, you'll start to appreciate how precious it is. And that, in my mind, is tripartism as a secret weapon for Singapore. When times are difficult, people can come to a compromise and fix on the big picture rather than on the near-term, little argy-bargy, but be prepared to do the give and take, find mutual benefit.
Thank you.
If I may add,
Yes.
what are the key ingredients needed to enable tripartism to remain a secret weapon? If you ask me, I've been in SNAF for 16 years. What I feel the tripartite partners have got faith, has got belief in Singapore. And because we have belief in Singapore, there is a love for the country. Not because I'm speaking on behalf as a Singaporean, but also from our federation, which makes up with a lot of foreign employer representatives as well. And because of that, we are willing to trust each other, and we are willing to listen to each other's concern and apprehensions. And because we're willing to listen to one another, we are able to come up with a solution that probably is a compromise, but it's definitely a win-win-win for all. I think that is a key ingredient. If we don't have the faith in a system, it's very difficult for us to move forward. And I'm thankful that Singapore has built for itself a very, very good system. Thank you.
I would like to add just 2 points to my colleagues' very important points. I think the first one is that trust is very important. I think that one we all accept it. And the trust cannot be maintained or taken just by us mouthing words like it is a secret weapon, it's our secret age and all that. There is something that you got to do to take action on all the time in order to foster it. And so it is a very human outcome. It is not something that if we pass somebody our org charts, our tripartite committees, and they form exactly the same things with the same terms of reference, that they can get the same result. It is not. So how does it work? It is actually in the human relations and the trust that is inherent in those human relations. So which means that we are here today because through those decades, through those challenges, the leaders from all three sides at those points have accumulated experience of sitting down, working through difficult issues, thinking through what should be done and all that, coming to consensus, win-win-win, and then going back to their respective parts, the membership, and whether of companies or of unions, and then be able to explain why and be able to deliver on those. And that, after that, when the dust settles, those memberships actually found that it is correct that those decisions were taken, that in the medium to the longer run, if not in the short run, it worked out better for vast majority of the people. Then they trust you, therefore you can trust each other, and then you are on to the next step. But this is a human thing, which means that because none of us last forever, it has also got to be continually fostered through the generations, through the cohorts of leaders from all three sides. So that's one thing. And the thing is that what is it that they should be discussing, which is the context in which they discuss. I just wanted to draw the example from today's subject, which was in one of the slides. I think Professor said that actually that very subject of should we extend retirement and all that was discussed, was put on the table even earlier than the chart shows, which means that there is something to be said very importantly about being forward-looking. Yeah. So we must also know that while we celebrate the strengths of our tripartism, because it has delivered for us all these decades, it is not a guarantee that doing those same things would get us further in the unknown future. So what actually has to also be done besides fostering that trust and working together is work together on what? So we also have got to together look forward into the future and try to anticipate what would be the important subject matters that are emerging, and then apply our joint minds and strengths to those, and then we actually build that bridge forward, and while at the same time being very grounded into each of our constituencies, our memberships, to be able to, again, keep that trust thick, and then it will work. I just wanted to share this perspective with colleagues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing this perspective. Indeed, as I study and research on tripartism, at a particular point in time, tripartisan partners have been very forward-looking. But it's only when we look back, that we don't think so. But moving forward, as I ended in my slide, I think tripartisan, to stay in the same spirit of negotiating benefits for the workers, for employers, and for Singapore as a whole, there's a need for tripartism to evolve. Yeah, so all the questions here have been like dealing with current issue. I want to pose a question to the panel. As we strive to build a more age-inclusive and resilient workforce, what are the key messages or calls to action that you would like to convey to employers, to workers, and the broader community in support of senior workers' continued contributions to Singapore's economy and society? So this is going to be forward-looking. So just share your thoughts. Yeah.
Before I answer your question, you notice that Dr. Koh is sitting in between the union and the employer. So I was wondering why so. Is it because you make sure that there is there's a distance between the union and the workers. That possibly one of the reasons you guys are thinking. But I tend to think otherwise. I think the government wants to be seen to be fair to both the union as well as the employer. Correct? Okay. I think there's a spirit of tripartism. But more important, the spirit of tripartism is there were many questions that was asked, which actually a bit tough. Especially so, why re-employment is not 5 years and 1 year? I suppose that also come from one person who wants to know whether my security or my next job is more ascertained. Because if it's 5 years, I'm more certain I don't need to worry about the next job. I think it's a very good question. I think it's through the tripartite discussion that we have arrived a good results, that we have flexibility, and at the same time we continue to hire older workers. But that question I did not answer because it is a tough question for employer to answer. So I look at the government choose to answer. I said, thank you very much, government. I think moving forward, I believe there are many challenges going ahead, especially so in the new era where AI is going to dominate our discussion, where you will also have energy transition coming in, and you'll probably have issues with regards to just transition on how workers and employers can be better prepared. We don't have a solution today. I believe if all parties, employees, and government sit down and discuss what are the challenges that are going to face us, and willing to say, okay, these are some of the tough measures that's going to be put in place, and how these tough measures is going to be phased out so that everybody will work together and see how we can actually progress Singapore.
Okay, this one, government will have the last say. Okay, I would say this, because many things will be unknown or it could be uncertain, right? So therefore, what I want to urge my fellow older workers or senior workers is don't be afraid. Have belief in yourself. Be prepared to adapt. You can adapt more than you think you can. And make use of the opportunities that the tripartite partners will be putting together for you. Speaking from the NTUC side, for example, if we say that we want to form these company training committees, is to create those specific platforms within organizations that you can come together and discuss. John said the same thing just now, so that we can actually implement things. And one of the things we want to implement is equitable skills building training opportunities for all workers, including senior workers. For example, that would then keep your skill sets up to date like the rest of the workforce in the company. So don't write yourself off. Make full use of these opportunities, and through platforms like that, we can also make sure that employers, companies, give equitable treatment, which actually serves the company's purpose also. So that's at the individual level. I think, and at the company level through mechanisms like that. And certainly, I think at the tripartite level, building on what I said in the previous question, we would have got to, again, look further afield and then see what might be the ways in which our workforce structure is changing, the profile of the senior workforce is changing, what is capable of, what kinds of industries are coming in, and proactively to ready them for that. So I think really is to take this future orientation, but to try to boil it into specifics and have those specifics implemented, and then work hard to encourage every company to do their part and work hard to have every older worker have the confidence to seize the opportunity as well. Yeah.
I'll just build on the two points that both parties made. And that is that actually, even though the aging problem is a problem that impacts a lot of the developed countries today, and everyone is looking for a solution, but I would say that our older workers in Singapore should have confidence that we have put in place measures and systems to really give you one leg up. Of course, it requires mindset change, as we said, in both employers and the senior workers. And mindset change can take time. But I think our older workers here in Singapore should have confidence that with the tripartite partners being aligned in the objective to actually upskill, reskill, and extend the career longevity of our older workers, and the government putting in significant resources to reshape the social compact. Right? Just take, for example, all the recent announcements about helping you to actually reboot your career by giving you extra subsidies through a Skills Future to even take a second diploma if you need to, from 40 years old onwards, to really reskill you deeply so that you actually can have a new lease of life for the next 20 years of your career beyond 40, 45 years old. These are significant moves that actually no other country has actually taken as well. And we're putting in resources to help you navigate your career choices through Careers Health, Careers Finder. All these things are actually a lot of tools and resources that we are putting on stream. It shows the determination of the government and the tripartite partners to actually give you the best shot at actually achieving your aspirations. And actually, if you look at this, this is where I think our senior workers should feel confident and be prepared to, venture forth, be open-minded, go and learn all the skills, use all the credits, and chart your way forward. I can say this because when I speak to my counterparts in other G20 countries, I went for a recent G20 meeting for labor and employment ministers. Many of the ministers in the developed countries are asking how we're tackling some of these problems. It shows that actually they also don't quite have all the solutions. But when I start sharing about our Careers Finder, sharing about our Skills Future Level Up program to give people a second shot at a deep skilling diploma, they are quite surprised that we are actually putting so much resources and thinking so far ahead of the next 20 years of our middle-aged workers' career to extend their longevity and to raise our retirement and re-employment ages, which many of the developed countries have been unable to do. Each time they raise the retirement age, there will be protests on the streets. But we have been able to do so because we have a social compact to help our people to see the importance of why we're doing all this thing. And the CPF system is gradually being enhanced as well to make sure that there is retirement adequacy even as you work longer. So I think that my message to all of us here is that there is confidence. We may be aging, but if we get our act together, our best years are ahead of us. But it requires all of us now to change our mindset and be prepared to put in the hard work, both as companies and as workers. And the government will be behind you all the way.
Thank you so much. Indeed, we are so blessed to be in Singapore. I think we are an example of countries that offer innovative solutions. So when I was in the Brookings Institute to talk about housing, they were very impressed with our housing program. And likewise, when I share about the CPF system in the OECD, they were also very impressed. So today, I think our unique labor market ecosystem can be what we see today is because of tripartism. Yeah, I think moving forward, even in the face of uncertainty, the spirit of tripartism must continue, and it had to grow stronger and stronger. Yeah, so I apologize that we could not answer all the questions. I think there will be, even as we move along, we will also have more questions, but we can leave it for another opportunity to discuss them. So with this, I'd like to thank you for your participation, and thank you, the partners in Tripartism, for sharing your insights. I really learned a lot from this session. Thank you very much.
Right, thank you panel and Dr. Chia for that wonderful insights into tripartism. Now before you return to your seats, may I ask you to just stand over there for a photograph session? Right over here. Thank you, and a round of applause once again to our panel and Dr. Chia. Right, and now it's my pleasure to invite Deputy Chairman, Tripartite Alliance Limited, to deliver the closing address. Mr. Bob Tan, please.
Wow. The reason why I'm standing here to make the closing remarks, because it says here retirement, re-employment, and older workers, and I'm 72 years old. So that's my qualification for standing in front of all of you. Firstly, I want to thank Yu Tong and his team, Tripartite Collective, for putting forward this particular program, this particular topic. It brings, for me, it's like going through memory lane, because some of these developments took place during my active time with SNEF, and I've done nearly 40 years, I think, with Tripartism, going from Ong Teng Cheong's days to Boon Heng and Sise, etc. And this was this particular topic was right at the time when I took advantage of the study missions that we do as a tripartite group to go to Japan, and it's there where we sort of learn about re-employment in the Japanese context, because in Singapore, government told us we want to increase retirement age. So the question really is, we know we have to increase retirement age because looking forward, we know we're going to have an older population issue to address. The problem always is that if you say let's increase retirement age, lots of issues. Employers say costs will go up, inflexibility will come in. And some union workers actually say, I don't want retirement age to go up either, because I want to retire at the time I want to retire, I want to take my 55, at 55 I want to take back my CPF. So it's not just a matter of retirement age. There are many issues that address that. But we all know the direction in which we have to go, because if we don't, we're going to face a huge problem further down the road, as we are seeing now. So re-employment was a way of trying to get everybody on board, getting the employers on board. And the thought was, over time, when more and more employers sort of extend the age of their retirement of their workers, it will reach a point where when you lift the retirement age, it's no longer an issue. All right? And that's precisely what happened. So in this particular topic and this area of re-employment of older workers, the government took the initiative, basically told us, get on with it. And we had to sit down, we know the direction, how to do it in a way we can carry the ground with the employers, and how can the unions carry the ground, the ground of their workers. And it's a hard sell, to be honest with you, when even re-employment came in, but we managed to do that. So if you ask me, what's the ingredient of successful tripartism? I would say enlightened leadership. Enlightened leadership government, enlightened leadership of employers, enlightened leadership of the labor movement. Because first agreeing, getting a consensus to agree, we're going to embark on it. Next, going to sell to your own constituents is not an easy job. But eventually, when we finally got the support, we went full steam at it. We made it work. We made it successful. Government came in with grants and different sort of incentives to make it easier. And that's where we are today. So that, I think, is the greatest ingredient. All right? And I don't think many countries in the world can profess to have that, even in their political leadership. The second part really is that we must be very clear what are we doing it all for. If you really think about it, it's actually all for the workforce. You may not think so, but it is. Because if you are as an employer in Singapore and you are hiring people, you have to be successful, right? If you're successful, then your workforce can be successful. If you're not successful, you shouldn't be here anyway. All right? So ultimately, we want to make sure that the workforce is productive, the workforce can help us make money, and therefore we can continue to invest in our workforce, because they are the reasons for our success. Right? And that is so important for us to recognize that. Remember, when we talk about employers, some people think, well, it's a company. No, it's not. Employers are people, you know. You could be the managing director, you could be the senior manager, you could be the worker. You're all in the same boat. If the company collapses, everybody goes. All right? So just remember, it is not about a company, an employer. It doesn't mean anything. It's all about all of us who is in the workforce. Now, the big difference is in the past, we've always looked at the management and the workers. And there's always this conflict that takes place. So you take positions, all right? I want to negotiate a deal with you so that you get the least and the company makes the most. But that has changed over time. And it's changed over time because companies themselves realize, the shareholders, you know, through their representatives realize that at the end of the day, you got to be fair. You cannot exploit your workers and then make money for the shareholders because it's not sustainable. The workers will leave you. Eventually, it's just not sustainable. You may 1 year do well, but you can't do well every year, right? And this is where trust, the word trust is so important in tripartism. And we have, over the years, had many instances whereby when times are bad, we need the workers to help out, to actually not go on strike when we say cut their CPF rates. But there is that promise that when things pick up, the employers will do their bit. Not necessarily just only in terms of increasing CPF rates, which I think is in the hands of the government, but in terms of profit sharing, in terms of doing more for the workers. And we've seen it over time, right, that has happened. So the trust has come about because the employers make promises and they kept it after the event. Sure, there will be 1 or 2 employers who will, you know, but as a whole, employers generally work on the basis that they need to build trust with their workers. And that's the reason why tripartism is strong. And if you look around at the things that we do as group, you know, whether it's May Day rally or whether it's, there's so many platforms that we have. And when we get together, it's always employers, the union leadership, government, they're all going in at the same time. So there's once at the National Day rally, I mean, I looked around, I mean, employers were there, union leadership, government was there. So I said to PM, I said, PM, you know, the employers work for the labor movement, you know, because not only are we all here, rah, rah, rah with them, but also we support them in their cooperatives, boards, etc., etc. He looked around, he turned around to me, he said, you're not the only one who works for the labor movement. So that single statement, all right, tells us who is the boss. So every company I'm in, and some of the, union leadership are here from organizations that I'm involved in. I tell the management, just know who is the boss, all right? And to be honest with you, we all work together for the good of the organization, and the organization is there for the good of the workforce, all right? And I think this mindset is not only what I think, it's across the board. You know, all the SNEF bosses and all that who attend, they realize that they are not just there as bosses alone. They're there for, like what John said, for Singapore, for what we want to try and do for Singapore as a whole, for the workforce. And that's why tripartism is so difficult to emulate in most other countries, because they've not had the experience of trust, being shown. They've not got bosses who has got level of interaction over the years, with the labor leadership, with government, etc., such that they are whenever there is an initiative to try and do something good for the country, whether it's through AI or any other means, you can pull people together in the same way that we've been able to do. So long may it last. I think this example of the journey that you look throughout the years is actually a demonstration of how tripartism has worked over the years. And I think we are very fortunate that we've built it to what it is today. So thank you all for coming. Thank you all for here to share. And thank you, Dr. Chia, for doing all the research and sharing that with us. And to our esteemed panelists who answered questions I thought, very honestly and pragmatically, because the reality of it is nothing is so black and white and simple. So thank you all, and thank you all for joining us. Yeah.
All right, thank you, Mr. Bob Tan, Deputy Chairman, Tripartite Alliance Limited. Right, before we end this event, on behalf of the Tripartite Collective, we would like to thank once again our supporting partner, Temasek Foundation. Let's give a big round of applause to Temasek Foundation. And another round of applause for each and every one of you for taking your time to attend this event. Thank you, everyone.